Quite a lot to unpack here. It's Monday, October 13th, Hoshana Rabbah, one day before the second anniversary of the Simchat Torah massacre. So many emotions, 20 living hostages, and four of the deceased hostages were freed today. The four bodies are still being checked to ensure that they actually are the four deceased hostages that Hamas claims they are. But assuming that that's the case, there are still 24 deceased hostages remaining in Gaza, including the body of Hadar Golden that has been held there for almost 4,100 days. Hamas, of course, agreed to release all of the hostages in one deal, but it should surprise nobody, has violated that. But I want to start with the positive, which is the 20 living hostages that were released today. It's absolutely incredible. The scenes are just they're extremely emotional. You have Avinatan Or, Evyatar David, the Cuneo twins, brothers, Segev Kalfon. So many unbelievable scenes. The families, so many communities, non-Jewish around the world, have really adopted these people like their own children, and to see them freed with their families is absolutely incredible, really heartwarming. I'm not forgetting anyone. Just there's just so many unbelievable scenes here. Trying to show some of them, but it's it's just incredible. And when you see that contrasted with obviously the memories of those who are lost fighting, it's extremely tough. And for those who do not have a happy ending yet, the parents of Omar Nutra saying, pleading really that, just as a reminder that this is not it. You still have 24 hostages that have to be returned home. And it's not enough just to say, okay, the war is over, this is done. It's important that this is actually taken seriously. And I'm going to try to pull this up here. Segev Kalfon reuniting with his parents. Just a really touching moment. I love Kobe putting a kippah on top of Segev right away. I got to meet this family over Pesach. It was unbelievable to see them. Just unbelievable people. Wow. Just incredible. Um, and look, unfortunately, even receiving the bodies of some of the deceased hostages, it's not going to be an easy thing. Some of the families are just looking for closure, and they deserve that closure. The question is now that Hamas has essentially violated that part of the deal, what is the consequence? What's going to happen? Is it really out of the question to assume or to question if any of these other countries, specifically Qatar or Turkey, perhaps are actually instructing Hamas to help hold on to these hostages, the bodies, to extract more compromise and more surrender from the United States or Israel in a negotiation? Hamas is claiming that they need time to find all the bodies. My sources indicate to me that that's not really the case. There actually are still perhaps eight hostage bodies that are not located, but the rest they pretty clearly know where they are, and I think Israel also knows where they are. So the question is, what's going to happen, and how is this going to be made right? Uh, Trump is very adamant that the war is over. So the question is, if the war is over and there is no going back, then how do you put the sufficient military pressure on Hamas to ensure that they are playing ball and actually going to release these bodies. It's the least they can do. And it remains to be seen, obviously, with the peace talk and seeing what else is going to happen. Another thing, just to note here again, a day before Simchat Torah in Israel, will be Shmini Atzeret in the United States. But take a moment just to remember those who fell on October 7th at the Nova Music Festival. IDF soldiers heroically trying to do whatever they could, members of the security service trying to do whatever they could, and innocent people trying to do whatever they could to save people. So I can only imagine what that's like for some of these families and the survivors who really fought, and now seeing these people released has to be a whole host of emotions I can't even begin to imagine. So it's something to keep in the back of your head, to take note of and remember, as there are these multiple emotions of this day. It's extremely difficult just to keep everything all in line. Um, Another interesting occurrence today was President Trump actually, in his speech, says that he asked Isaac Herzog to pardon President Prime Minister Netanyahu in his trial. Uh, Definitely got a round of applause from the pro Bibi crowd in the Knesset, but it's just interesting that Trump actually comes in and he is kind of forcing his opinion his way, very Trumpian, and it definitely is worth noting that, um, yeah, just that it happened. Let's also not forget that Israel has freed nearly 2,000 prisoners, including hundreds of terror convicts. So, reading Air Times of Israel, Israel on Monday freed nearly 2,000 Palestinians, including hundreds of terror convicts serving life terms from its prisons as part of a deal to reach a ceasefire and release the hostages held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Shortly after 20 living hostages were freed, Israel put 1,968 Palestinian prisoners on buses that departed for Judea and Samaria and Gaza. So, some of these people are actually released into areas that connect with Israel, not like Gaza, but connect, are actually integral to Israeli daily life and what's going on. Keep that in mind. Um, Among those freed were 250 security prisoners, most of them serving one or more life terms for deadly attacks on Israelis. They include a Palestinian police officer who joined in the notorious lynching of two reservists at the start of the Second Intifada in 2000. Again, that's referring to the case where two Israeli reservists took a wrong turn. They ended up being dismembered, and one of the terrorists held his hands out covered in blood. A Gaza resident who raped and murdered a 13-year-old boy, and dozens of other terrorists responsible for a series of suicide bombings and other attacks. Hamas said 154 of the prisoners were deported to Egypt. Families of the terrorist victims who were notified by the government ahead of the release expressed intense pain and grief, coupled with joy for their returning hostages and their loved ones. Posters hung up on the outer wall of the Ofer detention facility read, "He who threatens a flood is drowned and wiped out," referring to the Al Aqsa flood, Hamas's name for the October 7th, 2023 massacre. IDF forces could be used here using tear gas and stun grenades to disperse crowds on the other side of the nearby Judea and Samaria security barrier, gathered to celebrate the people that had gathered to celebrate the release of the prisoners. In the hours leading up to the release, police and IDF troops in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and East Jerusalem kept a close eye on freed security prisoners and their families to ensure their release wasn't praised publicly in Israeli controlled territory. Once reaching Ramallah, however, those returning to the West Bank were met with raucous celebration after the two buses arrived at a community center in the city. Palestinian Authority security forces had to move people away from the area to allow buses to pass. So when we talk about the difference in society, talking about the difference of perhaps peace, Trump is convinced that there's peace in the region now and that this is going to end everything since the times of the Bible, quite literally. Keep that in mind in terms of what a society celebrates, what a society actually values, and who is put on a pedestal. Imagine if something like this happened in your local neighborhood. Would you let your children anywhere near the released terrorists and murderers being paraded on the street? I believe if you're checking out this podcast, the answer is no. So keep in mind that this is what's being dealt with, and uh, the prospects for true peace are actually further away than ever. based on the fact that the Palestinian Society is still promoting this kind of behavior. So this is not being rejected. This is actually just being promoted in a very sick and cynical way. Make no mistake. This is the reality. Um, Hamas continues to execute people and is going after anybody who dares cross them. So keep that in mind as well. This is not a peaceful organization. This is an organization that is now executing quote unquote collaborators who dare cross it. So that's a little bit of the brief from today. May the neshamas of everyone who fell on October 7th and the soldiers who fell thereafter trying to free the hostages, may their neshamas have an aliyah, be elevated, and may the freed 20 hostages have an unbelievable time going into Simchat Torah with their families, and may the bodies of the 24 deceased hostages be released from Hamas captivity very, very soon.